Gentlemen, thank you for your appearance here and your decades of service to our nation. Secretary Kendall, you've spoken some about accepting near-term risk to fund the future force. I've gone back and looked historically at Air Force budgets for about 20 years. Are you aware that the Air Force has received $1.3 trillion less than the Army since 2002?
I was not aware of that.
And almost $1 trillion less than the Navy since 2002?
No, I was not aware of that either, Senator.
That's after accounting for the so-called pass-through budget, which I believe causes many people, to include members of Congress, to misperceive the Air Force's total budget. Could you share with us your thoughts about how that works?
The pass-through budget is budget that's included in the submission under the Department of the Air Force, but it's money that doesn't actually go to the Air Force. It's about $40 billion. Yeah, for people who are familiar with the budget and used to working with it, understand that, and they realize what that is. So for people who are not as familiar, it can be a little confusing in terms of what our total budget is.
And to be clear, this pass-through budget is not for Air Force classified programs, or not only for Air Force classified programs. It's simply your budget is used as the vehicle to fund these other programs.
That's correct. It goes to different departments.
That's why I say I think some people misperceive the top-line Air Force budget, and I worry that that might be contributing in part to why your service has had to accept this near-term risk now to fund the future force. And I think we as a Congress should try to address this situation to make sure this misperception doesn't continue.
Senator, what I look at is the adequacy of our budget to allow us to meet our missions. And I'm comfortable with the money that we're asking for this year to be able to do those functions. There is risk always, and we've tried to balance that risk, taking into account the pacing challenge in particular and trying to respond to that.
I want to return to both your opening statement and a question from Senator Reed about collaborative combat aircraft, or CCAs. You called them an operational imperative. Can you discuss in a little more detail about how significant these CCAs are for both deterrence and your combat capability?
Our analysis shows that they're very cost effective, that they basically, by augmenting crewed aircraft with relatively inexpensive CCAs, you get a net combat capability which is much more significant than if you tried to do it with all fully crewed aircraft. And our current anticipation is that the cost of a CCA will be a fraction of the cost of, say, an F-35. The other advantage is for overall affordability. It can make the force much more affordable. You get a lot more combat power for the same total dollars that you might be committing. So it has big benefits in both ways.
And you said again today in your opening statement that the history of failure in warfare can almost always be summed up in two words: too late. A famous Douglas MacArthur quote, but I think you've said it enough that maybe one legacy of your tenure is that people will think it's a Frank Kendall quote. And I think that's apt today as it was in MacArthur's time. What would be the significance if China were to field such unmanned aircraft along with its manned fleet before the United States? And how could delays in CCA funding impact that possibility?
China is aggressively trying to field the capability to defeat our ability to project power. And they've been working on it for at least 20 years. Their long-range weapon systems targeting our airfields, our carriers, our satellites, et cetera, are a threat that we really have to cope with. But they're also modernizing their air-to-air capability. And I think, Senator Cotton, you've seen the classified briefing that we've been providing. I can't go into great details here, but they have analyzed carefully how we fight and what we fight with, and they've been thoughtful about what they need to invest in to try to circumvent that or defeat it. And that's the reason that I'm so obsessed with getting on with the next generation capabilities. Holding on to things that are becoming obsolete over time just doesn't make any sense. We've got to get to the next generation.
Okay, and it's my understanding that this fleet of unmanned aircraft would be a mix of aircraft with both weapons, kinetic weapons, let's say, missiles, bombs, that sort of thing, but also other sensors or electronic warfare systems. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, that's correct. One way to think about it is that the pod or the weapon that might have been under the wing of a crewed aircraft is now flying in separate aircraft and managed by that commander of that aircraft. The analysis that we've done shows that the adversary has to honor each of those aircraft as it is a full threat. and that gives you a great advantage relative to the cost of having those things in the air.
So it creates a targeting problem for our adversary to have so many aircraft up in the air.
It both increases the targeting problem, but also gives him tactical dilemmas that he doesn't have to face right now. We can sacrifice one of these aircraft, put it well out in front, use it to draw fire, and force the other side to expose itself and then be subject to engagement. So we call them attritable. They're not expendable, but we can afford to lose some of them operationally. There's nobody in them that we're going to lose. So it changes our tactical options substantially.
While therefore enhancing survivability of our manned aircraft.
Exactly right.
Thank you.